As you can imagine, the prospect of building cultural identity after slavery was a challenge and proved to be an ongoing challenge. The Great Migration from the South was the catalyst to the largest art explosion in the 20s and 30s, known as the Harlem Renaissance. And during that period, you had writers like Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston. You had performers like Florence Mills and Paul Robeson. You had musicians, world-class musicians who had a global impact, like Cab Calloway, Duke Ellington, and Ella Fitzgerald. But you also had a baseline of artists, Aaron Douglas, Lois Mailou Jones, Jacob Lawrence, Augustus Savage, and Romare Bearden. Imagine these people left the most depressive area of the country in the South, headed to the North for new prospects and to also change the paradigm of how African Americans were looked at in this country. Remember, running concurrently with this was the Great Depression. If you can imagine this big artistic explosion happening at one of the worst times in United States history, it shows you the power of how art can prevail. And you'll find that there's always an ebb and flow with art and expression and these things that go down in this world. I was born in 1962 to teenage parents that were born in 1945. So if you know anything about the generations, we're all baby boomers. So I was raised with their sensibilities. Specifically, I was raised by a father who aspired to be an artist. As a child, I watched my father struggle, staring at blank canvas, trying to figure out what to say and what to do. Remember, the civil rights movement was going on around that time. There was also another undercurrent. He was only 18 years old, and he had to figure out how to take care of his family. So it was a big time in our family's history when my father decided, hey, I got to give this up. I got to take care of this family. He went into printing, and I decided to go into art. Now, we were both part of vocational education in Baltimore City. At that time in Baltimore City, there's 3 places you can go where you can learn a trade. I went to Carver Vocational Technical High School. It was one of those places you can go to learn any trade, whether it be dry cleaning, whether it be cosmetology, whether it be bricklaying, anything that people use every day, you learn that at this particular school. And a lot of people from the 20s on up to today relied on that education to build their future. Most of those people had a trajectory right out of high school to go into industry. The other part of them were entrepreneurs. 45% of those people opened their own business straight out of high school. Think about that. It was a powerful time, and for me to run into that kind of education, it was a blessing for me living in Baltimore City that had its own challenges. Baltimore was one of those kind of places that you had to find something. Vocational education was my answer, because what it did was one half of the day you went to academics, the other half of the day you studied your trade. You went through a 3-year program. At the end of that 3-year program, you were awarded work study. I walked into my class, and my teacher was 6'5", with an afro that was an additional 6 inches. And he looked me in the face and said, "White people will never let you do the kind of art you want to do. Let me show you how to letter, and you will always eat." And what was I going to say? He was 5 feet above me. But what he did was he assigned me to lettering. And rather than a 3-year program, I learned it in 3 months. And they were faced with an immediate compromising position of whether to take this kid straight off the streets and put him in work study his first year. I was blessed to receive that opportunity, and it would change my life and set the stage for me to attend the Maryland Institute College of Art. At that time, it was one of the top 5 art schools in the country. It was 4% minority at that school. That echo of what my art teacher told me was in my head walking in the door. I did not feel welcome. I did not feel nurtured. And at the same time, they were not teaching me anything about people that look like me. But when I left that school, you're talking about 70s, 80s, things were about to change. Remember that ebb and flow I talked about earlier, okay? The 70s was a wonderful time, but all of y'all can think of what you had on your walls, especially from the black community. I can tell you what I had on my walls coming up. I had Martin Luther King. I had a picture of Martin Luther King with JFK. Only the cool people had that one. People had Jesus Christ with the crown of thorns. People had Jesus Christ kneeling with the ray of light. People had the Last Supper. If you think about that, that's real powerful, but so limiting. That was the exposure that I had coming up. Now, there's something else that happened towards the beginning of the 70s. And I don't know if any of you can remember it. Most of you older folks in here can remember it. The black light poster. Remember those? Well, if you were real hip, you had some black light posters in the basement. But what was funny and what was peculiar about that was black light posters were, they were provocative. They had these black people with these big afros. They were kings and queens, usually nude, very sensual, very sexual, very colorful. And because we were so starved for cultural identity, we latched onto them, hook, line, and sinker. But guess what? They weren't created by African-American artists. They were created and put into the black community, and we just sucked it up, starving to see ourselves represented any way, shape, and form. But right around the corner from that was a phenomenon that most of you older folks, again, will remember. And if you haven't, please check it out. Blaxploitation films of the 70s. That is a prime example of us starved to see ourselves. For the first time, when you talk about media, movies decided they were going to put movies out that were all black cast usually, a lead that was African American, and we flocked to the movies to see this stuff. Now, never mind the fact that these people were normally thugs, gangsters, prostitutes. As long as it was a hero and a shero, and they were safe in the community and kicking butt, we were in, starved for cultural identity. Now, this is about to change again. Remember that ebb and flow. Media's latched on now. Most of you all, the turning point for all of us was when Norman Lear took the chance of putting a TV show on called Good Times. Now, you remember Good Times, right? JJ. I love JJ. He was my superhero. He was an artist, full family, living in the ghetto, living in the projects. They shared their struggle every day. It was a top-rated show. If you didn't know anything about black people, you knew a little bit by watching that show. I thought that JJ did the paintings. I know y'all did too. Don't try to front like y'all didn't think he did the paintings. But the paintings were actually done by Ernie Barnes. Ernie Barnes was a former NFL player. He got an opportunity to do the paintings for the set. It changed his life. This man became a rock star overnight in the art world. What would have happened if, say, Militant Michael was the artist? What would have happened if Beautiful Thelma was the artist? I often wonder how the paradigm could have changed with that one show. But wait a minute, before you ponder too deeply, the Jeffersons came out. Here was arrogant George Jefferson. He had swag, he was arrogant. He had a line of stores, that's all he ever talked about. He lived in a beautiful apartment in the sky. You know George Jefferson had money, didn't you? You know that the people from Good Times did not. But the one thing that didn't happen in the Jeffersons is that there was no art on the walls. And there was very few depictions that looked like him on that show. A lost opportunity. But wait a minute. That ebb and flow, right? Shortly after that, we were introduced to the Huxtables. The Cosby Show in the mid-'80s would be another catalyst to another artistic explosion. Because on this show, on this set, they had some of the most preeminent artists of that particular time. Varnell Honeywood, Brenda Joy Smith, Ellis Wilson, and several others' works were throughout the whole house. It changed everything. This media thing was creating this another opportunity, another compromising position. In this show, you saw a family living their best life, but also incorporating art into that life. It would change everything. From that one position, there's two different things that happen. With good times, color printing technology hadn't advanced to the point of affordability. In other words, if those pieces were available and readily accessible at that time, this revolution would have happened during good times, because everybody was looking for that work and couldn't find it. Flip it over, by the time the Cosby Show came out, color printing had gone through a major evolution, and color printing was affordable. So everybody and their mama started printing stuff. Printing presses were running all over the place. It changed everything because it was an accessibility point that we had not been exposed to ever. Millions of people began to buy art, mimicking the Huxtables. It was a materialistic thing, but it was also another part, that cultural longing, because it was the first time they could see 100% positive representations of them, and people started putting stuff on their walls. Now, back in 1985, if I had asked 10 people, you have artwork on the wall at home? 9 people would say no. 1 person would say yes. By 1999, it had completely inverted. 9 people said yes, 1 person said no. But ironically, in 2019, it's flipping back again. 3 people have work at home, 7 don't. What's happening? There's an erosion. And I can tell you what it was. The telephone. Imagine having the space and the time, the desire to be whoever you want to be, and now you have the world in your palm. Everything you want to see and don't want to see is in this environment. We're here now. Guess what else happened towards the end of the 80s and 90s? Somebody thought about, let's remove art classes, music classes, and physical activity classes in order to make room for what? Technology. Sounded like a good move, right? They didn't keep them all together. They excluded one. And guess which communities were affected the most? The African American community, because this action happened mostly in public schools. So you see, the ebb and flow goes like this, vibrates, goes up, goes down. It was getting ready to change again. But don't fret. Art prevails because from the time as early as I described, 1920, up to now, artists have been depicting everyday life and capturing our humanity. It's the one thing that ties all of those things together. To this day, with all the distractions we have, and we have many distractions. Distractions are abound. If you don't believe me, look around you. Amazon has closed more mom and pop bookstores and almost closed malls. Netflix has killed off, don't laugh because you still got your Blockbuster membership. But look what they did to the whole industry. And now look what they're doing to Hollywood. Massive destruction. How do you think art fares with all of this technology, this media, and all these things colliding? Well, don't fret, because art always prevails some kind of way, that ebb and flow. It's about to happen again. I can give you a couple examples. Obvious examples. Can you think of one? The Black Panther. Prime example of how it's getting ready to explode again. Black folks lost their minds It was a prolific time for them. They were going to the movies with dashikis. They were going to the movies with afros. They were playing drums in the lobby. And some of them was trying to book trips to Wakanda. Huge opportunity. All black cast, a hero. Cultural identity, media, colliding the right way for a change. But I can give you a couple other ones. I'll give you two names you may or may not know. Kehinde Wiley. If you don't know him, he's a well-known artist. Amy Sherald, she's a well-known artist. Do you know where she's from? Both of those artists did the presidential portraits. Now I know all of y'all had a whole lot of feelings towards those portraits. I heard a lot of opinions. Oh, it's so monotone. How did they paint her that way? She doesn't look alive. Why is he in a field of flowers? He looks so subdued. But what you missed is that ebb and flow. They changed the paradigm of what portraits look like. They were selected by, what happened in 2009? We voted in our first black president. So just think about this for a second. I came from, we shall overcome one day, to it actually happening. And my son, the first time he voted, was able to vote for Obama. You got this in your hand now. You've had a black president. So what's happening with our culture? It's going down. It's watering down. But don't fret. Just when it starts to sound like fire and brimstone, it vibrates again. Just last week, Tyler Perry bought a military base, and he converted it to the largest TV studio in the United States. Ebb and flow. Ebb and flow. Art will always prevail. Thank you.